This podcast is brought to you by Progressive. Are you driving your car or doing laundry right now? Podcasts go best when they're bundled with another activity, like Progressive home and auto policies. They're best when bundled too. Having these two policies together makes insurance easier and could help you save. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save nearly $800 on average. Quote a home and car bundle today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $793 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia. Identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. This podcast contains explicit language. If you want to know how explicit, keep listening. Hi, I'm Josh Levin, and this is Hang Up and Listen for the week of January 22nd, 2024. On this week's show, we'll talk about another classic playoff game between the Chiefs and the Bills, and lo and behold, Patrick Mahomes' team won again. We'll also discuss the potential death of Sports Illustrated with SI's former executive editor Adam Duerson, and ESPN's Myron Medcalf will be here for a conversation about college basketball players who are the children of other college basketball players and how that makes us feel very old. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm the author of The Queen, and I'm still recovering emotionally from all of the posts about the 5th anniversary of the pass interference no call that kept the Saints out of the Super Bowl in 2019. Also in D.C. is Stefan Fatsis. He is the author of the books Word Freak, A Few Seconds of Panic, and Wild and Outside, and he's still recovering emotionally from the time he could have played oxyfenbutazone for 1,785 points, but went with cat instead. Hello, Stefan.
At least it was QAT and not CAT.
With us from California, the host of 3 seasons of Slow Burn and the writer of the new Slate column Emotional Investment, it's Joel Anderson, who's not recovering from anything because he never liked the Houston Texans anyway.
I mean,
hi, Joel.
Hey, man, maybe next year I'll get the emotional investment in the Texans. We'll see.
Do you guys think that Jason Kelce was intentionally putting himself on display to try to deflect some of the attention from Taylor Swift? Joel Anderson.
Man, that's a great question. Do you ever think anybody is that happy for somebody else? Like, seriously, have you ever legitimately...
That's a good way to put it.
Good question.
Have you ever felt that happy for somebody else?
I don't know. I think Jason Kelce felt happy that there was an unlimited supply of Labatt's in that luxury box, and he could take off his shirt.
Are you taking into account the intersecting lines on the graph of inebriation and happenness?
Yeah, I mean, see, that does make it tough. I don't know. But, he is a celebrity now. Like, he is one of the top podcast hosts of the country. So, I mean, the thing is, being at the center of attention is this thing. So,
Do you think, Stefan, that Jason Kelce was intentionally trying to take away attention from Cara Delevingne so she could watch the game in peace as Taylor Swift's friend?
Was she there
absolutely.
too? Seriously?
Yeah. She was.
Oh, okay.
I was like, that's Cara Delevingne, star of Paper Towns.
It was all worth it just for the art but make it sports comparison of Jason Kelce, open-chested, arms spread, holding a tiny little beer can in his hand, with The Feast of Bacchus by Philips de Koning, 1654. Great, great art but make it sports.
We want to thank our Slate Plus members for always being happy for our success. But are you really? I'm not skeptical, even if Joel might be. This week, as we do every week, we have a bonus segment for you. We are going to talk about Chiefs and Bills momentarily. In the bonus, we'll do the rest of this week's divisional round game, won by the Lions, the 49ers, and the Ravens. If you want to hear that and bonus segments on other Slate shows and get ad-free listening for all Slate podcasts and support us, you need to be a Slate Plus member. To sign up, go to slate.com/hangup+. That's slate.com/hangup+.
With 1:43 left in regulation and his team trailing the Kansas City Chiefs 27-24 in the AFC semifinal on a frigid Sunday night in Buffalo, Bills kicker Tyler Bass lined up for a 44-yard field goal. Take it away, Jim Nance.
If he has to make one for us, the game on the line, he will. 44 yards, Bass. No, he doesn't make it. Wide right. Wow. The two most dreaded words in Buffalo have surfaced again.
My only quibble, Jim Nance, is that for Buffalo fans, Scott Norwood's missed kick from 47 yards to win the Super Bowl over the New York Giants 32 years and 359 days earlier has never stopped being on the surface. It is the moment through which an entire fan base is refracted. So while I almost always die a little when a kicker misses, the air left my lungs when Bass is kicked, sliced starboard. Joel, I know you're not historically capable of feeling sympathy for the Buffalo Bills, but damn, sports are cruel. And also, what a terrific game.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is true. My heart has grown hard to Buffalo since January 3rd, 1993, the date they ruined the Houston Oilers' last best shot at the Super Bowl. And so for me, even the Music City Miracle isn't cruel enough for Bills fans, right? But the game on Sunday night was pretty much everything we've come to expect of these Bills and Chiefs games over the years. Like, it was dramatic to the umpteenth degree, but ultimately won by Pat Mahomes and Chiefs down the stretch. And that's why, like, they make sure that game was the final one of the weekend, even though it risked like these chillier and frostier conditions up there. But this time, unlike those other games, it wasn't like Mahomes doing all of his magical shit and doing the game-winning drive or whatever. It was a really labored effort from a different sort of team. And like, the one thing I thought about as this game was playing out was, the Chiefs are the defending Super Bowl champs, and they don't often seem to get the benefit of the doubt given their accomplishments over the past 6 seasons, which all of them have lasted at least until the AFC Championship game. And so you're looking at this. So Buffalo is hosting Mahomes and the Chiefs for their first ever true road playoff game. They had won the previous game a month earlier. Then the game happened, and they outgained Kansas City by 7 yards, 6 first downs, had a time of possession advantage by more than 14 minutes, and had no turnovers. And they still lost. So, Josh, I don't know how the Bills could ever have it better against Mahomes and the Chiefs, barring like significant injuries, or if the Chiefs whiff again this offseason, because if you can't beat them under those circumstances, you got them on your home field. This is not the same Chiefs team. You don't make any mistakes in a manner of speaking, and you still lose. That's really, really got to hurt.
And they're also in some degree of salary cap hell going into next year, which NFL teams often are. I don't think that means the Bills will never contend again. I think far from it with Josh Allen at quarterback. But this game was really two different games. For the first 3 quarters, it was, I think, pretty similar to the divisional round game 2 years ago that ended 42-36 to the Chiefs in overtime, where it was just marveling at what these two incredible quarterbacks were able to do. There was, very little punting. I think maybe 1 punt combined in the first 3 quarters. The Chiefs, I think, scored on pretty much every possession, and that's why the time of possession thing is a little bit misleading. It's like you're not going to get that much possession if you're just running up and down the field constantly.
Yeah, Jack, they ran 47 plays, 4 of them with kneel downs. So they ran 43 plays total and scored 27 points last night, which is unreal. So yeah,
that's for the first 3 quarters. It was a kind of rampaging offensive shootout, and even more impressive given the weather conditions. And then in the fourth quarter, it turned into what these postseason games between these two teams, but honestly, between all NFL teams do, a quarter of failure, recrimination, bad refereeing, questionable decision making. And like, these are the two things, Stefan, that I don't know if we watch the NFL playoffs for them, but it's the two things we end up often talking about. Man, these quarterbacks are great. What a throw. Like, man, that rule where you fumble out of the end zone and it's a touchback, that's really stupid. Man, I can't believe Stefan Diggs didn't catch that ball. But, I was going to say going into this, it's like Stefan Diggs just on a beautiful throw from Josh Allen in the fourth quarter, just unbelievable, right into his arms, drops the ball. And yet here we are, talking about Tyler Bass the next day. I think it says something about, how we talk about kickers versus other position players, but I'm guilty of it because I did not gasp when Stefan Diggs didn't catch that ball. When Tyler Bass missed that kick, right. I believe the direct quote was, "Oh my God." Stefan.
I couldn't breathe, so I couldn't say anything when he missed the kick. I mean, the other thing we, of course, forget is that, A, it's really hard to kick a 45-yard field goal, 44-yard field goal in extreme cold with the wind blowing and the game on the line. And B, it's extremely hard to catch a football that is falling from about a half a mile up in the air based on the trajectory that Josh Allen threw it over your shoulder with a guy hanging on your back. I mean, this shit is really hard to do. I mean, it's hard to fault Stefan Diggs for that miss, though you're going to lament that miss. But there were that fourth quarter, Josh, you're right. It was just one sort of surprising series of dumbass things happening that contradicted everything we had seen leading up to that.
Who had DeMar Hamlin fake punt on?
Right. I was just going to say, they saw something. Kansas City only had 10 men on the field. So either the players or the coaches called for this fake punt snap to DeMar Hamlin, and it doesn't work. On the last drive, the Bills were being so deliberate. I think they outthought themselves. I think they were trying to score a winning touchdown and not give Kansas City more than, 13 seconds to get back down the field and win the game. After making all of those decisions on the long drive, Joel, Josh Allen throws two balls into the end zone that are pretty much uncatchable instead of trying to chip away and get one more first down to get them closer to the goal line.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because I don't want to be, a first take person. I don't want to, engage in, straw man arguments against people. But I have heard, over the last few years, sort of the scuttlebutt about whether or not, Josh Allen is a better quarterback than Pat Mahomes or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm adamantly in the camp that Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback that has ever played football. I guess you can respond with Tom Brady, but I'll just say we can look at the game. Like we can see the game.
Patrick Mahomes right? You don't 7 years into his career. We got a ways to go here. Or 8 years.
I don't even, but when Michael Jordan won his title, like his first title, I don't think anybody was like, well, I don't know if that guy's the GOAT or not. People, you knew, and that's what I think about Mahomes. But
I think you can safely say best and most talented. You're not saying most accomplished.
No, right. Not most accomplished. That's fair. But I think the thing that I think about, especially with Josh Allen, is that we talked about all the things that went right for the Bills in this game. They didn't make the mistake. They kept the game close, all that other stuff. They never let Mahomes, get away from them. But then when the Chiefs make that fumble out of the end zone in the fourth quarter, there's 12 minutes left, and the Bills had this drive. James Cook, loss of 4. A pass for 2 yards. Incomplete deep. Punt. I don't know if this is Josh Allen's fault. I don't know if it's that the Bills have constrained their offense in such a way that they don't trust Josh Allen and so they don't give him these opportunities. I don't know if he's so out of sync with Stefan Diggs and seems to have been for so long this season that maybe they haven't been able to figure that out. But if you can't, if you have all of this and Josh Allen is the guy that people say that he is and you still can't get it done, that has to sting. And it doesn't mean that I'm still very much run it back. Keep trying when you got a guy that's talented, when you got talent like that, you can build around them. Keep trying. I don't believe in scrapping and starting over, but this iteration of the Bills, it's hard to feel like they just didn't squander it.
I agree with it's got to sting. I agree with it must feel like they have to squander it. I agree that Patrick Mahomes is, if you're stacking up their careers, better than Josh Allen. I don't think you can argue that. But I would also argue that Josh Allen's performance in that game was unimpeachable. I think he was incredible in that game with what he was able to do. I hate the term with his legs, by the way, so I'm not going to say that. both running and throwing, I think what he was able to do is pretty incredible. And I would also say that at the very end, those 2 throws into the end zone, the first one, the guy was wide open and a defensive player, Chris Jones, like ran into him, and that affected the throw.
He pushed the offensive lineman into him. I mean, Chris Jones is a beast.
And I would say the difference in the game, there's so many differences in the game, but like, would we be saying that Josh Allen was better than Patrick Mahomes if Butker missed a kick and Bass didn't? And in the game 2 years,
I think a lot of people would say that. Actually,
and the game 2 years ago, Allen didn't get the ball in overtime, and that was the impetus for the NFL changing its overtime rules. I think there have been some like incredibly unfortunate circumstances for this team. And, just like in the regular season, when Tony lines up offsides and Travis Kelce's lateral doesn't count and the Bills beat the Chiefs. I mean, I guess you could say that, do you give credit to Mahomes if that Kelce lateral play works out? Do you not care about that game because it was regular season versus postseason? I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but like, I'm not, trying to argue the larger point, Joel. Like Josh Allen or any other quarterback in history is not going to compare to Patrick Mahomes.
Again, he played well, but you said it's unimpeachable. But I just think that if, like, do
you think he was the second best quarterback of the weekend? Do you think he was better than Jordan Love?
No, he's not better than. I don't think he was better than Lamar. No, if Lamar wasn't the best quarterback of the weekend, he was the second best. Josh maybe third. But the thing about Josh, again, like, are you defending him just because your name is Josh?
I was wondering if you were referring to him or to me for a second.
Okay, yeah. I just, again, that drive, a 3 and out with -2 yards, like, I just kind of feel like any other great quarterback in history.
But didn't the Chiefs have drives that went, multiple drives in the fourth quarter that went nowhere?
Yeah, but I mean, like, again, like, this is one of those times you get a chance to, you have an opportunity, you get a break.
Right. You're saying this was a gift, that
was a
stupid rule.
Right.
Basically negating.
You're offended that he looked a gift chief in the math.
Yeah, exactly.
And Kansas City would have been up 2 scores at that point. That was a complete gift. Yes.
I just feel like a truly great quarterback cashes that in, or their offensive coordinator trusted them enough that they put the game fully in their hands. And I'm not 100% certain how Joe Brady feels about Josh Allen in that way. So like, I kind of feel like they call a sort of constrained game where they're just trying to limit turnovers and they don't allow him to turn over them out of the game as opposed to fully unleashing him. That's all.
Yeah, he does thrown an interception or 2 in his career. I mean, what happened in that second half also, Josh, is that Kansas City's defense played much better. The Bills ran the ball in the first half sort of unstoppably, and they were not able to do that in the second half, and particularly in the fourth quarter. Did Buffalo not adjust? I don't know. I will leave it to the analytics folks who can break down every play and show us what happened. But Kansas City, which has a very good defense, which is something that Patrick Mahomes hasn't always had in his career, their defense really did influence the outcome of that game in the fourth quarter. It wasn't just Josh Allen.
The last thing I say, and then we'll get more into the rest of the NFL weekend in our bonus segment, but football is a team sport, and the quarterbacks get the glory, they get the credit, they get remembered after their careers are over. But so often it's a guy pinning a ball against his helmet that is why Eli Manning has 2 Super Bowls, or it's a dropped interception that we don't remember. Or, we would be having a different conversation about Josh Allen today. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it was a mile in the air. But if Stefan Diggs catches that ball, what an amazing throw by Josh Allen in the clutch. And so it's also a team sport on the other side. If Chris Jones doesn't get that push, then that, I think, is certainly a touchdown pass. And also, look, if Gabe Davis isn't injured and doesn't play in the game, then that's a completely different game. And the Bills' defense was completely decimated by injuries. And this is, to your point, Joel, this is where we can have a happy handshake at the end. Like, the playoffs aren't the way to determine the best team, particularly in football, because every team is so goddamn injured.
Particularly with 17 games instead of 16 or 14, which we've talked about before.
That's why the Chiefs were running up and down the field. The Bills' defense was completely like out of players in a lot of ways. I mean, the Chiefs were losing players, and I think ultimately it's going to be a better matchup in the championship game because the Chiefs are like defense is less injured than the Bills' defense is. And so we'll be able to like Mahomes against Jackson is really Jackson against the Chiefs defense and Mahomes against the Ravens defense on the road in Baltimore. Mahomes' second ever playoff road game. It'll be interesting to see. And, you know, if Josh Allen had come through in the end, he might have gotten his ass beat next week with, you know, nobody to stop Lamar Jackson.
Up next, we'll talk to Adam Duerson of Front Office Sports about the fate of Sports Illustrated.
If you like using debit over credit, Discover Cashback Debit is definitely a game changer. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases, which means you can get cash back on tickets for the game, snacks, team merch, all with no fees, making this season a total win. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia. Identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. Back in December, we talked about Sports Illustrated's website publishing AI-generated articles by AI-generated writers. Now, a little less than 2 months later, lo and behold, it seems like the real magazine and the real people who make it might not be long for this world. On Friday, employees of Sports Illustrated received an email that read, in part, the license under which the Arena Group operates the Sports Illustrated brand and SI-related properties has been officially revoked by Authentic Brands Group. As a result of this license revocation, we will be laying off staff that work on the SI brand. To help us decipher what the hell that means, we are joined now by Adam Duerson. Adam worked at Sports Illustrated for more than 2 decades, eventually becoming SI's executive editor, until a little less than a year ago, he got laid off in a previous round of corporate bloodletting. He is now the editor-in-chief of Front Office Sports, and he's co-writing a new book about Sports Illustrated with his former colleague, John Walters. Adam, thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, this is where you make good on the promise that I made on your behalf in that intro. Can you help us decode what the hell I just read? Like, what happened at Sports Illustrated on Friday, and what is that memo trying to tell us?
Sure. Yeah, that memo was kind of a disaster, especially for people like me who not only wanted to know what it meant, but needed to report on what it meant, because we reported it as what it said, which is they're firing the SI staff. And then the day was incredibly odd for everybody I knew. There was not a lot of messaging after that. Layoffs trickled in throughout the day, as these things typically do. And then there was a 2 p.m. all call. And if you were on that, I think you kind of thought you were maybe okay. And the all call, they kind of laid it out. They laid off a ton of people. And then they had basically bare bone skeleton staff at this 2 p.m. meeting that they told in 90 days you were done, barring a miracle.
All right, Adam, before we sort of dive into the nitty gritty of the historical demise here, I think it's confusing. I mean, Friday was a very confusing day. You had this one company saying one thing and this other company saying this other thing. And if you were not sort of versed in the nuts and bolts of what's gone on at Sports Illustrated in the last 5 years, you were probably a little bit at sea. And that's why I think people started asking for their favorite covers of SI on social media and posting their favorite stories. It felt like it was yet another obituary. But can you just sort of explain clearly like what the structure of SI right now is and what that means for the next few weeks?
Sure. Yeah, I actually think that's kind of the question everybody should be asking that I'm sort of not seeing in some of the media coverage, because the media coverage is a lot of Arena, which people think is the owner of SI. It's not. So you go back to, in our heyday, the SI we all know and love, run by Time Inc. They launched SI in 1954. In early 2010s, Time Inc. is sold to a company called Meredith, $1 billion deal. Meredith is a Midwest-based media company, largely print media company. And very quickly, within about, I think, the first year, they said, all right, these are the assets that work for us. These are the assets that don't work for us. SI is going to be sold. In short term, Meredith sells Sports Illustrated to a company called ABG for $110 million.
Authentic Brands Group, that's ABG.
Authentic Brands Group, yep. Which they own Marilyn Monroe. They own Muhammad Ali. Well, what does that mean, right? Like, we're not well versed in the world of licensing, but okay, this is a company that is like making money off of the names of these huge estates in the past. They own, I think, the life rights to, or a big partnership with Shaquille O'Neal. So for us, it was super confusing. But okay, ABG, they want to harness the power of the name SI, which is all right. I think at first our knee jerk is that's great. This is what we have. This is what differentiates us from everybody else. But then you wake up in short term, ABG actually essentially bisects Sports Illustrated. They say all those things that we want of Sports Illustrated, the name, the ability to put Sports Illustrated on things, T-shirts, posters, hotels, sports books, they're going to keep that. They own the library. They own all the photos. So they keep kind of all the good stuff. After they purchase Sports Illustrated for $110 million, they really quickly sell off the other half for $45 million. This company at the time called Maven, which, again, nobody had ever heard of. What Maven gets is the right to operate Sports Illustrated. So to sell against their content, you can create the magazine, you get your subscription of the magazine, ads in the magazine, ads against the website, and that's kind of it. So you have this deal now where Arena, they've leased the right to run Sports Illustrated.
Adam, you worked there until last year when you were unfortunately a part of a round of layoffs there. And you've talked a little bit about like the degradation of the SI brand, right? And we don't, the people that listen to this podcast, I mean, surely they're familiar with what Sports Illustrated used to be, right? But can you tell us what's left now and how it compares to the newsroom and the resources that were there when you first joined? I think it was like 20 some odd years ago. I
mean, I think I'll lead that by saying there are still really talented people there. SI still has really incredibly smart people. It is still the place that like you go to out of college if this is what you want to do. It still has that appeal. Some of my favorite writers in my time there, Mike Rosenberg, Greg Bishop, they still have talent there. To your point of like the degradation, I came up in a print world, so you printed everything, and at your desk, I used to have, just let's say, for example, I was the NFL editor at one point, and I had in front of me my list of my NFL writers. So if something came up, here's what I'm going to go to, long list of whatever. And you would cross names off as they're let go because I can't go to Greg Bedard anymore for something. And then other people, I passed someone else once had a whole staff list, and you would watch them cross off and cross off and cross off to the point that there are 10 times more X's across these lists than there were not. The resources 10 years ago versus today are ridiculous. 5 years ago versus today, still probably twice the resources.
Wow.
I went to the SI website yesterday to try to watch Dan Campbell's post-game speech. And when I clicked on the link, the website was slow to load, and then it was like taken over by a McAfee antivirus ad. And I like couldn't even read the thing that I wanted to read, if that's a sign of degradation. But Adam, I guess the question now is, there is this 90-day window. Somebody could come in and say, either we think we can exploit this brand better, or we care about journalism. We think we can make money off of it because there are good people there and people want to read about sports, presumably. What kind of level of, I guess, optimism do you have that this could actually be, in the best case, a positive thing, that it raises an alarm that this is a crisis and maybe somebody will want to step in and say, either because they think it's a good business or because they think it's like good for America, will want to come in and step in and rescue what remains of Sports Illustrated?
you hope that someone tries, that something happens here, right? Like, it can't be any worse than it is now. That's not possible. So I think a lot of us just hope it changes hands in one way or another, whether that means that Authentic takes the license back and licenses out to someone else, which is going to take, I struggle to see that.
When you were there, did you guys go to Authentic and say, you need to take this license back? We need to get somebody else in here?
There were, summer of 2020, very direct, under the table, secretive conversations. You can call it a coup attempt, but there was direct channel between editorial and ABG at a very high level. Maven is destroying this brand. You need to be aware of what we're experiencing here. And some of that was what we would encounter in our feedback in the field. People struggling to storytell, to get access to things. Teams that wouldn't deal with us anymore, would cut us off at really high levels. Athletes at really high levels who were asking, like, what the hell's going on here? We communicated that. It was not hard to put in front of them all the public errors. The Mavens, they're all human beings, right? And I respect them all, but they were not at a professional level.
They had a high school kid covering an NFL team, I believe.
The Bengals, yeah. High school kid, a lot of checkered backgrounds, weird hires. It just didn't match, what SI was, what people had come to expect from SI. I had a portion of my day every day. I would spend half an hour just like keeping a doc of all the crap we saw. It's like, this is not okay, this is not okay, this is not okay. We put that in front of them. There were intense discussions for a period that summer. There were promises made. There were discussions about bringing it back under ABG. And then we woke up one day to sort of have the rug pulled out from under us. That's not happening. We're moving forward. The deal we have is the deal we have. We've got our money here. One would think that they just weren't able to find someone to take it back, right? Like, if they cut the deal, they lose that money.
Yeah.
So to do the right thing would have cost them $45 million. And if they don't have someone else to take it and hand it off to for that $45 million, they're not going to do it. They're business people. I understand that, but that's how we got where we are.
Arena owes them $45 million potentially. This could end up in court. Who knows? There has to be a scenario where this just isn't worth it to Authentic Brands Group. And you talk about white knights in media and whether that's even viable or whether this is just a bunch of legacy media people here on this podcast talking about trying to save something that we remember and loved. But as you, and I'm sure you went through all of these thought processes and conversations, like, there's got to be, right? Like, it's still the brand. Maybe there's a nonprofit approach. Maybe there is a way to scale this down and focus on the kind of quality long-form writing that SI was known for, and that you helped, that daily page one story you helped inaugurate at SI Online a few years ago, that maybe there's a place in the media landscape for that. Is that just being sort of naively optimistic, or do you think that is a solution that is feasible here if the owners, Authentic Brands Group, care to go down that path?
I mean, to say it's naively optimistic would be too painful for me to come to, because I think that's what got a lot of us through the last however many years you stayed at SI. I mean, the writing was on the wall for me for a long time, but you hope beyond hope, like, this can't go away, right? Realistic? I don't know. I think some things have to change. I think that ABG has to take the brand back.
From Arena, yeah. So I think there's a bit of a game of chicken going on here that, if you're on the inside, you can see. You have Arena Group is in the process of being under new ownership. The guy who owns 5 Hour Energy is in the process of buying Arena. He comes in, he's, looking pretty close to the books, and they're not pretty. And he's got this not good deal in front of him, right? They're paying $10 million a year, let's say, to ABG. That's ridiculous. He knows the market value on it. We want a new deal. So I think, this is as simple as, like, give us a better deal or else. What are you going to do about it? So on the other end, you have ABG. In order for them to take it back, they have to find somebody else to operate it. And that's difficult in this media market. To your point of white knight, like, does that person exist? So I know that those communications, those conversations have started. We reported in Front Office Sports, Authentic is talking to people about this. It did not take me much effort to find a few people that they're talking to already about it. So
Whether they do anything with that is going to depend on like what happens in those conversations, what type of deal is put in front of them. At the end of the day, you have ABG owns the brand, and they're making financial decisions on whether it's worth it to preserve the integrity of the brand. In this case, it would mean maybe it's not $45 million for the operating rights to Sports Illustrated. So is it a white knight? I don't think of that price. Not today, but maybe there's some other arrangement. Maybe it's less of a deal. Maybe they're making enough off of it in their licensing. 2 weeks ago, you saw Authentic put SI's name across the bar at the Kentucky Derby, right? They're continuing to license this brand. So if they're doing okay, maybe they can take less. Or I think the better future from SI is reuniting the parts and Authentic selling off SI in some way so that somebody can use the IP. If you imagine today, if you took Condé Nast and you told them you can't do anything with their stories. They don't own their stories. They can't turn them into movies. They can't turn them into podcasts. They can't turn them into anything creative beyond their publishing. I think you got to reunite the pieces there. I think for that to work, and I'm guessing that people will look at this and the possibility of taking it on. That's a deal breaker.
Adam, you've been a part of this family for a while, right? Like you work there, you're seeing what's happening there. And we hadn't kind of asked you like I can guess at how you feel about what's going on there, but maybe tragedy is overselling it, but it must feel like really personally devastating for you to have been there for what appears to be the end, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is heartbreaking, and it's been heartbreaking to go through it sort of again and again and again. There's just waves of this, right? So I lived some waves. I experienced a wave of layoffs. Now it's, phone calls and tears. That is heartbreaking to watch. In a lot of ways, though, and this is what we talk about, this book we're working on SI, it's a bigger thing might be going away. It's not just SI. It's the idea of a magazine or a group of storytellers at a really high end with resources who are telling stories at a premium level. This is not to any way take away from anyone else does in storytelling space, but what SI was, like, will never exist again. We all lived in New York. We had this weird work week where we were off Tuesday and Wednesday, and you would have this bullpen of reporters all in their 20s who just had like the smartest conversations ever. This collection was so special, and it just will never be repeated again, right? No one is investing in journalism this way. So for me, the heartbreak is not just SI, not just a brand, not just the magazine I used to get as a kid, but something that will never happen again. That for me is sort of like the heartbreak in all this.
Adam Duerson was the executive editor of Sports Illustrated. He's now the editor-in-chief of Front Office Sports. He's working on a book about Sports Illustrated called The Masthead with co-author John Walters. Adam, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys. This has been great.
Up next, ESPN's Myron Medcalf on the children of college basketball players and the inexorable passage of time.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Hey, listeners, whether you love true crime or comedies, celebrity interviews, news, or even motivational speakers, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue, right? And guess what? Now you can call the shots on your auto insurance, too. Enter the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. The Name Your Price tool puts you in charge of your auto insurance by working just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, then they'll show you a variety of coverages that fit within your budget, giving you options. Now that's something you'll want to press play on. It's easy to start a quote, and you'll be able to choose the best option for you, fast. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive Insurance. Quote today at Progressive.com to try the Name Your Price tool for yourself and join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Reboot your credit card with Apple Card. It gives you unlimited daily cash back that can earn 4.35% annual percentage yield when you open a savings account. A high-yield, low-effort way to grow your money with no fees. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone to start earning and growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
One of the top college basketball recruits in the class of 2023 was a point guard from Camden, New Jersey named DJ Wagner. If that name sounds familiar, it should. His grandfather, Milt Wagner, and father, DeJuan Wagner, were also once top point guards from Camden who went on to spend a few years in the NBA. As a freshman, DJ is averaging 13 points a game for 8th-ranked Kentucky and is projected as an NBA first-round pick later this summer. If that story of 3 generations of basketball stardom doesn't make you feel old, how about Jameer Nelson Jr., or Chuck O'Bannon Jr., Bronny James, or maybe even Reed Sheppard, son of a pair of former Kentucky stars, Jeff Sheppard and Stacey Reed Sheppard, who was a 1994 All-SEC first-teamer. You can read all about them and more in Myron Medcalf's story on ESPN.com last week about the sons of those 1990s and early 2000s college basketball stars. Today, we've brought on Myron to talk about his story and how we all got so damn old so fast. Thanks for coming on, Myron.
No, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
And so please tell us, which player was the one who got you thinking you should do a story about this particular phenomenon?
That's a good question. I mean, maybe all of them, but I think Jameer Nelson Jr. is probably the one I felt the most personal connection to. I covered the 2004 NBA draft with Jameer Nelson. So I was an intern at ESPN, the magazine, 21 years old, living in New York City. They sent us to the draft. And that was the Dwight Howard, Emeka Okafor draft. And that was my first real big media experience, on a national level. Like, they got us credentials. We were interns, me and my boy Jason Jordan. And it was just like, starstruck, right? These guys we'd seen on TV. And suddenly we're sitting here interviewing them, talking to them. And I remember coming up the escalator with Jameer Nelson. And I remember being like, I'm 21, about the same age as him. I'm like, man, this dude's about to go after his dreams, man. And so am I. In a weird way, I'm not saying I was them. But in a weird way, that draft and covering that draft, there was that parallel where it was like, this is my first big time break. And then here are these guys, their life is about to change as well. So I think Jameer Nelson, having a kid, is probably the one I felt the most personal connection to because of that experience at the NBA draft. And then you just look around the country and you're like, man, there's so many of these guys who have kids who, are not just playing, but are playing at a high level. Michael Jordan had some kids who played, but it wasn't to this degree that we're seeing, the Reed Shepherds and Bronny, some of these other guys who've just really developed into kind of high-level talent.
So I think we all responded in kind of the same way when reading your story, Myron, which is that, those of us who are obsessed with sports since we were kids, we mark our lives with different athletes who kind of came to define different periods in our lives. And when you grow up watching, whether it's Michael Jordan or LeBron James or somebody like Jameer Nelson, who's a star but not a superstar, you can kind of position yourself in, your parents' living room or in your first apartment or, in your house with your wife or whatever. And when there's a Jameer Nelson Jr., I think the natural response is like, man, I'm not like watching in my parents' living room anymore. Like, I'm a grown-ass man and like this feels weird. Do you have that feeling as somebody who's, covering the sport when you come across, whether it's a Jameer Nelson Jr. or Charles O'Bannon's kid or Jeff Sheppard's kids, when you like talk to these players or see them, is it like a time warp for you? Or are you able to focus on them like as individuals with their own stories?
Every day it's a time warp. I mean, when I see any of these kids, because I'm like, I remember exactly where I was. I remember I do TV sideline reporting for ESPN. And the last 2 years I've been on the Big Ten circuit. We don't have the Big Ten anymore, so I kind of bounce around. But during the Big Ten, I did a lot of Michigan games. Juwan Howard's kids, Jace and Jet Howard. I'm sitting there talking to them, and I'm like, I remember exactly where I was with the Chris Webber timeout. I remember exactly what I was doing when I watched that play. I remember exactly where I was when UCLA won that championship. So for me, it's every day, just seeing these kids, and just, knowing that when I was their age or even younger, I was watching their dads, play at the highest level. And it was also a time when college was the best way to the NBA. So you had really, really elite players, guys who had stayed 2, 3, 4 years, who wouldn't do that today. They'd leave after a year, So, like, you had really high-level guys. You know, you look at even the Fab Five, Jamal Mashburn, like, those dudes stayed 2-3 years and probably could have played in the NBA as freshmen. But so you saw them at their peak. And I think that was the thing about just college basketball in general. There were so many high-level guys. And now to watch their kids, for me, I mean, college basketball shaped my life. I mean, we used to take dollar bets in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in my high school class on the Duke-UNC games, right? We have no connection to Duke or UNC. But for whatever reason, whenever Duke would play UNC, we'd go to keyboarding class, and we had a little crew in the back, and everybody would throw their dollars on the table, you know, whoever you were betting on. And then somebody would hold the dollars, and then you'd have to pay up the next day. You know what I mean? So we were into it. Like, college basketball was so important and so big for us. And then the other thing was, with college basketball, because there were so many high-level guys, you were also watching it going, that dude could change my franchise, that dude could change my team. I remember watching Glenn Big Dog Robinson at Purdue, who could, like, you know, you could wake up Glenn Robinson out of bed and tell him he had 3 minutes to get ready for a game, and he'd score 35. Like, he was just kind of made that way. And then when he comes to the Milwaukee Bucks, it's like, yo, this dude is a scoring phenom. You know, I watched him. So the time warp for me happens all the time, because I think for me, college basketball was such an important part of my childhood sports experience.
Looking forward to betting against Christian Laettner's grandchildren someday.
It'll happen.
The thing about the current generation, Myron, that I wonder about is that, look, there's always been kids of great athletes who go on to have great college careers or pro careers in any sport. What might be different in the last 25 years is that kids of great athletes have the means to become prodigies just through the money and travel and attention and
Instagram.
There is that too. I don't know that anyone's ever done a sort of a quantitative study of how successful children of athletes become. But, you know, we're seeing, you know, it's like Carl Yastrzemski's grandson has been playing in the major leagues for a few years. That dates me and makes me feel like I'm really fucking old. Jameer Nelson, I was like 40 when Jameer Nelson and St. Joe's went 27-0 and made that run in the tournament. Do you think there's something different about this generation of the children of the super rich, super successful athletes, particularly in basketball?
Yeah, I do think the one thing that was most interesting, and probably the thing that all the kids I talk to, I mean, I call them kids, they're grown men, but, you know, in my mind, college players are still kids, is they all talked about no matter what positions their fathers played, they wanted them all to be versatile. So it's interesting. You know, you talk about a Jamal Mashburn, who was clearly like a 3-4 dude in the NBA mid-range game, used his size. You know, he's telling his kid to be a shooter, you know, how to be a ball handler. Like, that's how these guys came up. Chuck O'Bannon said the same thing. So I think just these dads who played in the league were like, the era of one-dimensional players is over. You're going to have to be able to do multiple things. And they helped their kids that way, kind of guided them that way. The resources help. I mean, all the kids I talked to, they didn't miss any meals. You know what I mean? Like, they were doing well for themselves. I mean, Jameer Nelson, I put in the story, he thought it was normal to go to the Orlando Magic facility and order an omelet. You know, like, he didn't know any different, you know? So I do think the resources helped on a level in terms of you got to be involved in the AAU circuit. I mean, you have guys, I've done stories about fifth graders who have trainers. So you got to be all in on basketball to make it. And the resources do help. The genetics, even though you got a guy, Jamal Mashburn Jr., who's 6'2" versus his dad 6'8", you see this with Bronny James. Physically, these guys are different a lot of times. They may not be the same size as Pops, but they are certainly like physically gifted. And that helps as well. But I think their IQ is probably the overall thing. It's just how smart a lot of these guys are when you grow up with somebody who played at the highest level and they're walking you through the game at an early age from that intellectual perspective. I think that certainly helped as well.
You know, earlier, Myron, you mentioned Michael Jordan's kids. And I just remember when they showed, you know, Jeffrey and Marcus, their high school games, like back in 2006, 2007. And, you know, like, they weren't great, but they seem to still be receiving a lot of scrutiny given the level of player they are. And I'm just wondering now, it's about 15 years later, whether because high school basketball is always on, or maybe college basketball is much less popular than it was, or maybe because we've gotten used to stardom being sort of different, like it's a lot more diffuse than it used to be. You can be famous just by streaming now, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just sort of curious, what they've said about dealing with the attention and the expectations now, because I'm just wondering, maybe it's not as bad as it used to be because we're just sort of used to people being famous and in front of the camera all the time.
Yeah, I mean, interesting to bring up Jeffrey Jordan. I covered his team at Illinois when I was a beat reporter, in the newspaper world. So I did some Illinois, Minnesota games. And I actually did a game with Jeffrey Jordan where Michael Jordan showed up. And in my mind, I'm getting ready to meet Michael Jordan, right? He's here in the building. He walks in, the crowd rises. I'm like, I'm about to meet Michael Jordan. Bro, they have this whole section of security dudes who are like, no, like you can see him from here. You are not getting close to Michael Jordan. That's happened to me twice in my life. It happened with Michael Jordan. I was 10 feet. No, actually 3 times. I was 10 feet from Michael Jordan. I was 2 feet from Muhammad Ali before this giant security dude who looked like he just fights people for a living was like back up. And then I was like 40 feet from Barack Obama. So I've had all these like close experiences. But yeah, I remember covering Jeffrey Jordan's games and everybody kind of knew Jeffrey Jordan was there because he was Michael Jordan's kid and he got this walk-on opportunity, right? So, that was sort of the understanding. It wasn't, no one saw him as like a high skill guy. Marcus Jordan, I mean, he was decent at UCF, but I don't think anyone saw him as, okay, he's going to go to the NBA and play at a high level. So the attention was different for those guys. To your point about social media, what I think happens is these kids get exposed to the popularity, the pressure much earlier. At a very, very early age, they're on someone's Instagram, they're on someone's YouTube channel, and it's like, hey, here's the son of X. And if you play on the AAU circuit, I mean, as early as 7th or 8th grade, people are identifying you as a potential star. So I do think that certainly helped a lot of those guys that I talked to. But the one thing that felt unique and that felt like something that generation to generation never changes is hearing the critics of, you're not your dad. All of these guys on some level dealt with that. I mean, you look at Reed Sheppard. Reed Sheppard had to prove that he was good enough to play at Kentucky or any Power 5 school. Nobody believed in him. He wasn't this high-level guy starting out in high school. Chuck O'Bannon, man, he told me, hey, my mom had to remind me, do you. My dad said, do you, because he's at AAU games and kids in the crowd are like, wait, that's the O'Bannon kid? Jameer Nelson. We forget Jameer Nelson, one of the greatest college players of all time, and played in the NBA for a very long time. So now you got that name. You're Jameer Nelson Jr., and you're starting at non-Power 5 level. You're hearing that as well. So I think the one constant was, even though maybe they faced the pressure at an earlier age, it didn't change the difficulty with having to digest and stomach when people say, why aren't you more like your dad in whatever way? And I think that's a unique thing that only they can probably speak to.
Wasn't it Sharif O'Neal who at one point said, yeah, when I was growing up, we just didn't tell people that I was Shaq's kid?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those guys, and I talked to Sharif, but I think a lot of those guys have tried to do their own thing. I mean, you remember a couple of years ago, Sharif turns pro and, Shaq, his dad, wasn't in favor of that, and I think these guys try to step out of their father's shadows. And it's hard when your dad or your mom was that good, was that iconic. But it's difficult. I mean, I covered Sharif O'Neal, multiple schools, and it was like, hey, man, he's good. But, I mean, his dad's one of the greatest centers of all time. So it's just a unique thing that these guys carry because you can be really good, but your dad was so much better than everybody else, it's hard to live up to that.
Yeah, I mean, at LSU, I think the case that was the most difficult was Josh Maravich, Pete's kid, who came to LSU as a walk-on and had just a really, really hard time in all sorts of different ways. But I've got a quick theory that I want to share, and then maybe we can do a lightning round of the athletes who make us feel the oldest. The theory is that, so these kids' parents are super famous, but it's not like Blue Ivy or Sasha and Malia or something, where these kids are like well known from the time they're 1 or 3 or 5. I think the reason that we feel old or it causes these sorts of like nostalgic memories for us is that they kind of emerge fully formed as athletes when they're kind of first in our consciousness. It's just like, I didn't know that Jerome Bettis Jr. existed, and now I see that he's a 2025 recruit. It's not like I'm like following Jerome Bettis's children from the time that they're like 3 years old. So, all right, here's my nominee for the athlete who made me feel the oldest. Achilles Smith Jr.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oregon commit. Here's another kind of a half-baked theory of mine. I think when it's somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr., who's like so great that he instantly, his father is like such an icon, but Marvin Jr. is so great that he develops his own kind of mythos around him instantly. But with like Achilles Smith Jr. is like, I kind of vaguely remember that guy at Oregon and being a draft bust. And like, wait, he has a kid now? It's like, it doesn't feel real. And like that kid has his own like, you know, baggage to deal with, I'm sure. But that's my nominee, Achilles Smith Jr.
No, that's a good one, man. Because there are so many, man, that you could speak to. I mean, Barry Sanders' kid plays for Michigan State. He's a walk-on on the basketball team. And I remember seeing him for the first time. He looks exactly like Barry Sanders. Like he's built like him. You know, like it's just like a clone on a basketball court. Getting old is a privilege, right? You know, so there's an element of it. It's like, I also appreciate that I've been able to cover multiple generations of athletes, but I do agree. A lot of these guys maybe come into our consciousness freshman, sophomore, junior year, something like that. But then the spotlight's so big, everyone kind of gravitates to it. And you're like, wow, I wonder if they'll be like this, you know? And that kind of really starts the hype.
Well, I'll say this as a guy who sat behind Calvin Murphy Jr. in homeroom class in Houston. I went to a game. This is when I was at ESPN, Myron, and I was doing a story on the UCLA kids that got arrested in China. So, you know, one of them was LiAngelo Ball, right? Yeah. So I go to a game at Sierra Canyon High School, and on the team are Scottie Pippen Jr., and Kenyon Martin Jr. And Kenyon Martin made me feel old because Kenyon Martin is the same class as me in college. Like we graduated 2000. I was like, wow.
Kenyon Martin and Kenyon Martin Jr. both played against LeBron James in the NBA.
It's crazy.
It's just crazy. It's crazy. And I should say at the game, in the stands, Kanye, Kim Kardashian, Kenyon Martin, Scottie Pippen, Larsa Pippen, and Derek Fisher, because his nephew was a kid who ended up playing at Ohio State for a little bit.
I'm guessing you didn't get close to them either.
That's ridiculous.
I didn't touch them. No, I didn't get close to them.
All right, who's yours, Stefan?
Josh sent around a bunch of names before we talked. Marvin Harrison Jr., Shedeur Sanders, Frank Gore Jr., Antonio Gates Jr., Kennedy Urlacher, Henry Hasselbeck. And then I saw Nico Gramatica, son of Martin Gramatica, the famous kicker who ruptured his ACL celebrating a kick. And this one really hurt me because when I did my summer with the Denver Broncos as a kicker, one of the first things a player on the team shouted when I walked onto the field was, "It's Martin Gramatica's dad." So I guess that makes me Nico Gramatica's grandfather, which is a little terrifying.
That's great.
That's wild. That's wild.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if the Del Grecos had any kids. Wait, you know what, Stefan? Didn't the Del Greco have a son that kicked too?
I don't know. I haven't been keeping up on the family trees of every NFL kicker from my childhood.
I mean, Bronny's for me, honestly. Bronny James. I mean, LeBron was famous as a freshman in high school. You know, I mean, he's drafted in 2003. So what was that, 2000? I think he was USA Today High School Player of the Year. For the first time. You know, he's also, for people forget, all-state football as a freshman in Ohio. Right. So, I mean, he was 15 playing in those Michael Jordan summer pickup games. So, I mean, that's 24 years ago. And I just did for TV Bronny James's game. You know, and I'm looking at 19-year-old Bronny James, and I'm like, you are older than your father was when he was drafted. And it's like, man, how did this happen? And I covered Bronny James's game in Dallas when they had to move it to the Mavs arena when he was a freshman in high school. You know, so like even watching him from freshman year to this, and I've seen him, it's amazing to watch a young man develop into this. I mean, it's stunning.
Father Time remains undefeated.
That is true.
I got one last one because I played with this guy at TCU, and now he's a starting linebacker for the Denver Broncos, Baron Browning. And I just remember, I was like, yo, we played together. You know what I'm saying? Like, and now he has, like, you know, I have a 2-year-old. I have an almost 2-year-old. He has a son that's in the NFL. So anyway,
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So there's all kind of ways to feel old if you'd like. But anyway, Myron, thanks so much, man. You know we love college basketball here. We're gonna have to have you back on before the year is up. But thanks so much for coming on, bro.
Nah, thanks for having me.
Advice Week is back at Slate, and we have a ton of exclusive content and exciting perks for Slate members. Subscribe now to unlock extra advice with weekly bonus segments of Dear Prudence. Plus, you'll get ad-free listening across all your favorite Slate podcasts. By joining, you're supporting Slate's independent journalism. Your membership matters. To subscribe now at our special Advice Week price, click Try Free at the top of your show page on Apple Podcasts, or visit slate.com/podcast plus.
Now it is time for Afterballs, sponsored by Bennett's Prune Juice, endorsed by Kenny Sailors, who says, it was okay. Bellevue, Washington, 2025 athlete Ryken Moon is the son of Pro Football Hall of Fame quarterback Warren Moon. And, you know, the quarterback who captured my heart as the leader of the Houston Oilers for more than a decade. And, you know, we thought we'd bring up Ryken because we had on Myron Medcalf a little bit earlier from ESPN to talk about those guys that make us feel old. Well, Ryken Moon is not one of those people because Ryken Moon is a junior in high school. And I'm going to look up Warren Moon's age right now. How old is Warren right now? He is 67 years old. So, Warren Moon being 67, having a junior in high school does not make me feel old. It just makes me think, wow, that guy has got a pretty good amount of energy, I would think. So, but about Ryken, he can play a multitude of positions. He's a receiver, cornerback, safety, and he's rated as an athlete by 24/7 Sports because of the positional versatility. As we mentioned, he plays at Bellevue and is the number 91 athlete nationally in his class. He's a 3-star, considering Arizona, Washington, Nevada. So, you know, a Big 12 school, a Big 10 school, and I don't know what league Nevada is playing in, but presumably they may be giving him a chance to play as quarterback or something.
I don't know what this means, but I'm looking at 24/7 Sports, which has his college list. Arizona, interest, cool. Nevada, interest, cool. Washington, interest, cool. Though it does say that he has an offer from Nevada and got one from Arizona when he was in like 9th grade or something.
Don't you think, given what Myron talked about earlier today, that like wouldn't a smart rule of thumb for schools to do is just sign the progeny of your greatest athletes? Like, just do it. Like, don't overthink it. If they show some promise whatsoever, don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it.
Yeah,
there's a lot of players on college football teams. There's probably room for Ryken Moon.
When I saw Antoine Winfield Jr. playing at Minnesota, I was like, Ohio State, you guys really couldn't use that guy? Anyway, Josh, who is your Ryken Moon this week?
A couple of weeks ago in our Slate Plus segment, we talked about a peculiar incident in the NFL season finale between the Saints and the Falcons. With the Saints up 41-17 in the final seconds, the outcome not in doubt, they lined up in victory formation near the Atlanta goal line. And instead of kneeling down, quarterback Jameis Winston handed the ball off to Jamal Williams for a touchdown. Final score, Saints 48, Falcons 17. Take that, our hated rivals. After the game, there was some angry shouting from since fired Falcons coach Arthur Smith, and a lot of conversations about propriety and rectitude and sportsmanship. But as I said back then, it felt kind of strange to have a big conversation about whether it was right or wrong, given that such a thing had never happened before and would probably never happen again. Well, I was wrong, at least about the never happened before part. As listener Mark Flynn pointed out to me, there is a precedent, and it happened in 1987 with that year's NFL players' strike as a backdrop. The strike affected 3 weeks during the 1987 regular season, with teams fielding replacement players, none of whom were Keanu Reeves, despite what Hollywood might want you to believe. Some teams fielded rosters that were entirely made up of replacement players. One of those teams was the Philadelphia Eagles, who were coached by Buddy Ryan. As our pal and former hang-up intern Laura Wagner noted in a piece for Slate after Ryan's death in 2016, the coach staked out no position regarding the strike except to demand that his players act as one, no matter the decision. The Eagles did that, with no players crossing the picket line. Philly's rivals in Dallas, coached by Tom Landry, had 7 players cross the picket line before they played the Eagles on October 11th, 1987. The Cowboys won that game 41-22, with star defensive players Randy White and Ed Too Tall Jones on the field, having crossed the picket line, and they were on the field at the very end of the game, again, when the outcome was no longer in doubt. After that game, Buddy Ryan said, "I'm just looking forward to the Cowboys' butts coming to Philadelphia. I'll tell you that. I want to play them with the real Eagles and get after them. You can tell them that." All right, fast forward just 2 weeks later. I hope somebody told the Cowboys. The strike was over. Again, it was only 3 weeks. The 1-4 Eagles post-strike were hosting the 3-2 Cowboys at Veterans Stadium in Philly. And on that day, Buddy Ryan got his revenge. As the clock ran down, the Eagles were up 30-20 with the ball, and quarterback
Randall Cunningham?
Randall Cunningham, the legend.
Okay, yeah, all right. Yeah,
UNLV's own, getting ready to kneel down. Or was he, Joel? Here's what it sounded like on the game broadcast.
Well, they were one of the few teams that had nobody cross the picket line. They built confidence and closeness during that period, and a victory here today over Dallas certainly will only improve that. Now Cunningham's going to throw it to Quick, and it is a flag down on the incompletion in the end zone. 2 seconds remain on the clock. Francis had the coverage for the Cowboys, and the Eagles will have the ball at the 1.
All right, so what happened there is that Randall Cunningham dropped back in kind of a crouch, sort of pretending to kneel before launching the ball deep. And then, as a ref threw a flag for pass interference, Cunningham ran down the field pumping his fist in the air, while the receiver, Mike Quick, waved his hand in the air like a lasso. A few moments later, with just 2 seconds left on the clock, Keith Byers ran it in for the Eagles as time expired, and the cameras panned to the fedora-wearing legend on the Cowboy sideline.
Coach Landry cannot be happy. There you see the look. Just wonder what's going through his mind.
What look did Tom Landry? Because I never saw his face make any expression, so I could only imagine.
He just looked like Tom Landry. What was going through his mind, Laura Wagner noted in her Slate piece, was, "I hate Buddy Ryan." Here's the actual quote. "It's not worthy of comment. Everybody has to live with themselves. I don't have to live with it. I was afraid it might be like this." Buddy Ryan, for his part, had this to say in his post-game press conference.
How'd you feel about that last Sunday?
Oh, that's fine. I mean, I had it planned all along. I told you people in Philadelphia, we've been dreaming about that since we left Dallas 2 weeks ago.
According to an ESPN blog post by Phil Sheridan, the Eagles coach also said something else. Here's Sheridan. "Ryan ran up the tunnel toward the Eagles locker room and spotted a knot of reporters in the hallway. 'Fuck 'em,' Ryan shouted." And that is the story of the other time a team pretended to go into victory formation. The end.
Not surprised it involved the guy who punched Kevin Gilbride on the sidelines during a game. So it makes sense.
It's all about union solidarity, Joel. It's not about not about anything else other than being a good union man.
Fair point. Wouldn't he also the architect of the first Bounty Gate? The first known Bounty Gate?
Sometimes violence can be used for a righteous cause, and sometimes not.
Josh, you're being a real good public defender today. I'm impressed. You should have tagged in when BML was arguing on behalf of Michigan a few weeks ago.
That is our show for today. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. To listen to past shows, unsubscribe, or just reach out, go to slate.com/hangup. You can email us at hangup@slate.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. For Joel Anderson and Stefan Fatsis, I'm Josh Levin. Remember Zelmo Beatty, and thanks for listening. If you like using debit over credit, Discover Cashback Debit is definitely a game changer. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases, which means you can get cash back on tickets for the game, snacks, team merch, all with no fees, making this season a total win. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.